Hi there. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all here. Hello, hello. There is a lot on the discussion agenda today. Hi, Hellcat. Hi, Sky. Hi, Juju. Hi, James. Hi, Rena. Hi, Heidenhain. Hi, Novis. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a little bit. Hi, Solomon. Hi, Joe. Hi, Kareen. Hi, Christina. Hi, Armin. Hi, Veronica. Hi, Lily. Hi, Praxis. Hi, Beatrice and Mariana. Hi, Gap. Good to see you. Hi, John. Hi, Natlin. Good to see you as well. I'm doing okay, Rena. How are you guys doing? Hi, Cheryl. There is a lot to discuss today. So let's, how are you all doing today? How is your day going? How is everything? And I'll jump straight into telling you a couple of things that are worth. So you guys let me know. I will wait for a couple more people to join, of course. Fine day, good to hear. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Anna. Oh my gosh. Hi, Victor. Hi, Pat. Hi, Grant. Sorry, with this dress, it's really hard to read what's happening on the screen on TikTok because of the checkers. Hi, Lauren. I'm good. How are you? Hi, Sandra. Good to see you. Good morning indeed. Well, good afternoon for me, but good morning for you guys because a lot of you are lots of hours behind. A lot of you are lots of hours ahead. So good time of the day to everybody. Hi, Grumpy. It's been a stressful day. Oh no, what happened? Hi, Nomad Cat. What happened? I hope that your day gets better. Oh, it's noon already. Yeah, I'm confused as to how it's 3 p.m. already, but I've had a lot to do today. It was a very productive day. I was supposed to have an interview earlier today with the Azovstal defender that I've been telling you guys about. So he has been in a physical therapy rehabilitation facility due to his injuries that he has sustained on the battlefield to his leg. And we were supposed to chat yesterday. The facility there that he's at is in the middle of the woods. Is in the middle of the woods in Western Ukraine, and his service in the woods is really not functioning very well. So yesterday we were not able to conduct the phone call because he had no service at all. So I suggested that maybe we could do it today. So we decided that we would try to do the interview today, and he will try to get internet from the workers at the facility, because technically they're not supposed to use the internet there because they're supposed to kind of focus on their rehabilitation, and internet is mostly for like employees to kind of do work. And he did try to use it, but the problem is that this facility is in the middle of the woods in Ukraine. And the internet there to begin with is already pretty bad. So we tried it. The connection was awful. I mean, horrendous. And when the weather is basically the internet connection, even through like Ethernet or Wi-Fi there, depends on the weather. And the weather has been horrendous as well. So I couldn't hear him, nor could I see him. So we decided that we would conduct the interview next week when he's back to Kyiv, where he will be permanently now, at least for now. And so we will be chatting when he's in Kyiv because he will have, home internet, and he will be able to have service. So there will be a lot of backup plans if something goes wrong. which I was kind of upset about because I was so enthusiastic to speak to him. But you know, life is life, and I know that we all have been waiting for this interview. Hi, Crazy Cat. I know that we all have been waiting for this interview. And he was very enthusiastic to speak as well. The interview will happen. It's just that he, I approached him at a time at which he is at a physical rehabilitation facility, and therefore it's kind of hard to guarantee that things will go smoothly. But he really does want to make it happen. He's very willing to speak. He's actually very sweet. I've been communicating with him behind the scenes a little bit through Instagram and basically through social media. I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him a couple of personal questions to share with you on Patreon, sort of to hold everybody over because of a huge delay. He might not answer me until tomorrow because it is getting late in Ukraine. By the time I will be done with this broadcast, it'll be about midnight there. And also, well, he every time he needs to respond to me, he has to go outside into the bushes, pretty much. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So that is news on that. Then the second news that I want to address, hi Todd, that I want to address straight away, and hi Loyalty, that I want to address straight away is I made a video on something that had happened in the EU pertaining to Hungary. And that video so far had blown up to about 50,000 views on TikTok, but that is not the point. With 50,000 views on TikTok, there come trolls. And with trolls come narratives that they are trying to spread. And so I will tell you what is happening in the EU. I will tell you the narrative that trolls are trying to push, and I will tell you why that narrative is false. So one thing is the EU is getting ready to punish Hungary for official reasons, and they're going to punish them monetarily, and they will not be giving them as much money as they have been giving them before. Let me remind you that Hungary is the second largest recipient of EU budget after Poland. So there is a lot of mismanagement of the money going on. The official reason is the corruption in Hungary's government, and the unofficial reason is Viktor Orban, the prime minister who was recently elected, who is incredibly far right, his super tight connections to Putin. Now, the trolls are saying, oh, who is the fascist here? Because basically Viktor Orban's government is fascist. Human rights do not exist. For the past 12 years, Hungarian government has been ruining Hungary. There has been a huge issue with human rights. There has been a huge issue with freedom of speech. There has been a huge issue with a lot of things that pertain to their quality of life. So, hi David. So the EU had recently introduced new legislation that will allow them to kind of give a warning in means of punishment to countries that are not upholding the core values of the Union. So the trolls come in with the narrative of, oh, this signifies to me the collapse of the European Union. Oh, it's just that the EU wants to enforce the American agenda. Oh, and this one is my favorite. Who is the fascist here? So just because a country doesn't agree with EU, they're going to punish them monetarily. That is fascism. So first of all, the trolls want you to think that EU is collapsing. They want you to think that things are going well, and they want to start discourse within the EU countries. Thank you, Todd. And thank you everybody for the gifts. Thank you so much. Basically, they want you to feel like the EU is not doing well. They want to start discourse within the countries of EU, and they really want you to think that things are going wrong. So basically, by that, their methodology is to cause the issue by saying the issue already exists. By saying that the EU wants to enforce American agenda, they're basically trying to just perpetuate the narrative that the collective West is the United States, and the United States is currently not doing great, and look what happened to them, and this is what the EU is trying to do. Well, that happened to the United States because of far-right government. But anyways, I digress. So here is an example that I want to provide to you. Why is it not fascist to enforce policies in the EU? If modern day Hungary was to apply to be a member of the European Union, they would not be able to get in because they cannot uphold the human rights values and standards. They would not be able to get into EU because because the European Union is a union of democratic countries, and a far-right fascist government is not one. They would quite literally not qualify, and their application would be rejected. Now, for the longest time in the EU, if you were already a member, a lot of countries would basically bring themselves up to speed with the EU, apply, get in, and then regress. And the EU was doing nothing because once you're in, everything flies, right? But now, seeing what's been happening all around the world and the rise in popularity of far-right governments, the EU is concerned, obviously, because far-right governments are not democratic governments. And therefore, they decided to enforce new rules under which they're going to be punishing the countries that are not upholding the values of the EU, and potentially even introduce a kind of strategy for expulsion. Because why should you be an equal member of the EU if you are not upholding the requirements that were in place to join? So that makes no sense, because that means that you just clean up your act in order to join the EU, then you enjoy the benefits, but you're not upholding the requirements that were there to begin with. Now, let me give you an illustrative example of why this is fine. When you get accepted to a college, you get accepted based on your grades, and you get accepted based on your attendance. And so you are required to uphold those grades and that attendance, right? If you get financial aid, you are required to keep a certain standard of your contribution to the educational institution, right? If your attendance drops and your grades are horrible, then you are put on probation, right? And then if nothing changes during your probation period, you are expelled, because you were accepted into that institution to begin with, based on certain attributes that you were showing to possess. And if you no longer possess those attributes, and you're no longer willing to withhold the standards under which you were accepted to begin with, you get expelled. Why should it be different in the European Union? It should not. If you were required to uphold certain standards of living and democracy and human rights to join the European Union, then you sure as hell have to be able to uphold those standards while you're in the European Union. So there is that rhetoric, and there is that narrative that is completely wrong, that it's that, you know, EU is fascist for doing this, EU is fascist for the whole idea of saying, oh, so if you disagree with EU, then you just get punished. Well, yes, because you are a member of the EU, and when you were applying for the European Union to be a member, you knew exactly what that entails as a government of the country. That entails certain standards, certain values, and certain put out from you, right? You have to bring something to the European Union that's worth it for the European Union. You can't just drain the EU budget and keep regressing your country to the olden days, right? So as when a country applies to the European Union, they agree to the standards that the European Union entails. So what do you mean? This whole argument of, oh, so if you disagree, you just get punished. Yes. If you disagree, your member benefits are suspended. It's not even a punishment per se. It's your member benefits being suspended because you are not upholding your end of the deal under which the EU accepted you to be the member of the EU. So that's the whole basis there. And it's too funny to me when trolls are trying to use the narrative of disagreeing with the EU and being punished as fascism, because if you sign a contract and you do not uphold the terms and conditions of a contract, there is always a clause that tells you what the consequences of that are. Now, in the EU, there were no consequences, which is why a lot of countries cleaned up their act, joined, and went back to their old ways. And they're just simply enjoying the benefits of being in the EU. And so that cannot keep continuing, because at that point, the EU is supporting these countries and giving them support financially and otherwise, and is not getting anything back, right? So this contract basically is very one-sided. And so if you think about it in layman's terms, when Hungary joined the EU, Hungary signed a contract with the European Union where they had their responsibility and their requirements, and the EU had their responsibility and their requirements. So the EU upheld its end of the deal to Hungary, but Hungary is not upholding their end of the deal to the EU. So how is it wrong to enforce consequences for that? It is absolutely not wrong. This is what happens when you are not upholding to your end of the contract. Plain and simple. And one of the things that I realized that trolls, Russian trolls do that comes kind of unnoticed is that they take these things that are normal and they make them sound like they're out of ordinary measures that should not be happening, like paying the consequences for not holding up your end of the deal, right? The whole argument to begin with is incredibly stupid, because the very definition of the European Union is a union of democratic nations, right? The very opposite of democracy is fascism, as in far-right regulation. So if you democratically elected, even if it was democratically elected, which fascism never is, there's always some sort of a pretext behind it that put them in power. That's why it's fascism, right? Oh, here we have a troll that says EU will fall. See? Precisely. That is their rebuff to Russia pretty much decomposing. But so the whole thing is that having a far-right government is directly opposite of what the European Union entails in its very core, right? So here is the thing. If you want to advocate for your far-right government and you want to be a member of the EU, then you gotta choose one or the other. You can't have an extremely far-right government, live in a dictatorship or a fascist political ecosystem, and say, oh, so just because we want to live in fascism, we can be in the EU? Precisely, yes, precisely. If you want to live with a fascist political ecosystem, then yes, you quite literally can't be in the EU, because fascism is the opposite of democracy and EU is the union of democratic nations. How much more simple do I have to explain this? But where I was going with this is that, see, when I spend, however, 15 minutes explaining this, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because I took the time to explain the core values of the EU and the very definition of the EU and the very definition of upholding a business contract, right? But when a troll comes in and says, oh, so when you disagree with the EU, you get punished, that's how fascist states are built. You disagree, you get punished. It turns your gears, right? But that's not, but here is the thing. That is not the same, because it's not that you disagree and you get punished because someone doesn't like it. It's that you signed a contract under which you've agreed with the policy of the European Union, and then you went against it, by that breaching that contract. So there is that. Caker Buds on YouTube says, not everything evil equates to fascism. Look at the far left communists and what they did to Ukraine in the 1930s. Sure, but in this case, far right is the issue. In this particular case, we're talking about far right. And in this particular case, we're talking about Viktor Orban, who is evil, and Viktor Orban, who is a far right fascist. Jokesta says, would it be the same logic for NATO membership on Twitch? Technically, it should be, but NATO and EU are not the same. They are not governed by the same institution or the same people. They are interconnected, but just because EU changes its legislation does not mean NATO will, although it most definitely should. Because NATO is a defense alliance, and there are some countries in NATO that are breaching that contract as well, and they are offending other nations. So I would say that logic should apply, but would it? So far, we don't know. So yes. But basically, okay, so here's the thing, Gianmarco, the problem is the NATO standards of being a member of NATO NATO is not a union of democratic nations. NATO is a defense union, right? So Turkey, although not a democracy, solely that would not disqualify Turkey from being in NATO. However, escalation of situations in other countries should, and Turkey has been participating in that. So I know that you know, thank you, Karine, but I do find it important to clarify that because it's not, it's not necessarily obvious for everybody, and I just don't want to equate the two things because they are not the same. Hi, Tone Y. I'm forever gonna call you Tone Y, because well, you never let me know how to pronounce your very complicated, intricate foreign name, Tony, so difficult. But yes, so basically that is that, and that's what I wanted to say, because this situation is important to be clarified, and it is very important to keep talking about it and to bring it to everyone's attention, because this is we are at the brink of rise of fascism worldwide, right? And this fascism is trying to make you believe that combating fascism is fascism. So there are very important distinctions that need to be made that basically distinguish consequences, reasonable consequences for somebody to not uphold a deal that they signed with somebody just blatantly punishing you because you disagree with them. Again, let's say, I don't know, signed a contract with you saying that I would be giving you 15 strawberries every month, and for that you will provide me with a room every month. And then I'm only giving you 2 strawberries every month, and the rest I'm giving away to someone else or keeping for myself. You are not anymore obligated to provide me a room because I am at the breach of our contract, as I'm not upholding my end of the deal. So same here. And I cannot any longer enjoy the benefits. And you could easily cut up the space. You could easily draw a smaller border of the room that I could be using for my stuff, because I'm only paying you a fraction of what I had agreed to pay you. right? But you could also expel me because this has been going on for months and months and months on, because, you know, it's not right. Or you could give me a probation time and tell me that something's not going right. And with that, you can, try and see if my behavior changes, right? So there we go. So there is that. So another thing that's important today, and it's straight out of my thumbnail, that is the fact that the US had, from bipartisan standpoint, introduced a bill into the Senate to recognize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. And this bill has been submitted to the upper chamber of Congress, to the upper house of Congress. Now, that is an incredibly big deal because that would change the course of everything and sanction Russia, in layman's terms, out of the wazoo. And that will provide pathway to basically economically destroy Russia to the point at which it cannot anymore benefit from being a gas and oil monopoly, basically. There has been, oh no, David's not troll crazy cat. He says projection is a major tool of these proto-fascists. He's just saying that what they say is, I'm not fascist, you're fascist. He's not telling me that I'm that I am fascist, unless I'm not understanding something very well. But basically, what is happening here is that there has been a lot of talk and a lot of push forth, as well as some pushback on recognizing Russia as a terrorist state, because, well, a lot of countries are going to lose money on it, and they love money, you know, and a lot of countries still benefit from Russia and still make money off of Russia. But if Russia is going to be recognized as a terrorist state, that is going to change much, 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 much more. As in, it will not, be, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that with recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, it is not going to be so easy to avoid sanctions for them anymore. It is not going to be as gentle as it has been so far on their economy, and it is really not going to leave any leeway for their economy to keep holding on. So there was pushback on this bill. There were some US officials that were standing up against it. There were multiple times in which this bill was trying to be in which this bill was trying to be submitted into the Congress. It wasn't happening. There were a lot of issues with it. There was pushback on it. There were people that kept finding excuses for why not. There were people that were advocating for why yes. And finally, now, Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, Blumenthal is a Democrat, Lindsey Graham is a Republican, worked together on introducing this bill, and they together submitted it into the upper house of Congress, which might be one of not many things in which Democrats and Republicans both agree. If you don't know, actually, Lindsey Graham has been an incredible advocate for Ukraine, which is interesting to me because I think I don't agree with Lindsey Graham on most things other than this one. He went to Bucha, and after visiting Bucha, after all of the atrocities there were discovered, hi Paul, he had come back and he had become one of the biggest advocates for Ukraine and against Russia in the United States as a whole. The entirety of the state of South Carolina supports Ukraine to an abnormal point. I visited South Carolina, for those of you who are new, with my mom when she visited this summer during my birthday. So we went to South Carolina, to Charleston, for my birthday. And one of the things that kind of warmed my heart and really surprised me was the amount of Ukrainian flags hoisting everywhere. There would be an American flag, and right next to it, there would be a Ukrainian flag. There would be a lone window somewhere, and there would be a Ukrainian flag outside of it. Almost every balcony, there were so many Ukrainian flags, I lost count of them. See, when I went to Chicago last month, it did not surprise me that there were Ukrainian flags all over Chicago, on the main street. It was on Michigan Avenue. It was on all of the avenues, right? Especially in downtown Chicago, so many Ukrainian flags, you couldn't even, everywhere you looked, it was blue and yellow. But Chicago has one of the strongest and one of the biggest Ukrainian diasporas in the United States. So that was almost like, not a given, but that was almost like, oh, this is very nice, but not surprising. I was trying to see if there is a big Ukrainian diaspora in South Carolina, because I was like, wait a second, why? Why is there so much support for Ukraine? And so I asked a bunch of local people, mainly in stores where my mom and I were shopping for something, whether there is a huge Ukrainian presence here and why is there so much support. And they all said because Lindsey Graham is incredibly supportive of Ukraine, and Lindsey Graham does a lot for Ukraine, that they have had a lot of clothing drives, they have had a lot of medication drives, a lot of people have been donating, and so the support for Ukraine has just been outpouring. And they said that most people who have these flags in their windows are not Ukrainian. For instance, the lady that I was talking to at the beauty store where my mom was shopping for something, we had a very long conversation, and she said, like, no, we have a Ukrainian flag on our in our house, and all of our neighbors do too, but none of us are Ukrainian. And that's basically the gist of what the support is like in South Carolina. Also, interestingly, when I was talking to people there and asking them about the support for Ukraine, right? I would say to them, like, I'm Ukrainian, right? And I've been like advocating for Ukraine on social media for a very long time. And I kind of explain like history, I explain geopolitical context, I explain political context. I sort of explain the how and why what's happening is happening on social media. And that's what I've been doing since the beginning of the invasion. And every single one of the people to whom I have mentioned that asked me for my social media handles and asked me if I don't mind giving it to them, if I do not mind them following me, because they have been looking for more news resources and they feel horrible that there is not enough news coverage as opposed to the beginning of the invasion. And that was something very nice and very surprising, because I did genuinely feel like no one's just saying that they support Ukraine. It felt like everyone genuinely is looking for ways to support. Everyone is genuinely looking for ways to do more. And everyone is genuinely interested, right? Because I do talk to a lot of people here and there who say that they support Ukraine so much, yet they genuinely, like, they as in like, we're bad, and that's about as much as their support is. Or maybe they will put a Ukrainian flag in their window and that's about it, right? They don't really catch up with the news. They don't really know what's happening. They are, anytime you tell them something new about the conflict and about what's happening on the Ukrainian soil, they kind of look at you with this blank stare and these kind of wide open eyes, because they haven't heard about it, right? And they haven't heard anything since like Bucha. Some people quite literally don't even know what happened to Mariupol. Some people don't even know what Mariupol is, because they simply stopped following the news after Bucha, which is when the news coverage on mainstream media has dwindled down significantly. And so when I find someone and they genuinely do care, and you can tell that they have been wanting to find more coverage and they're keeping up and they're trying to read, but they're lacking a comprehensive resource where they could find out everything, because it does take time to research. It does take time to find things, especially if you don't know what you're looking for, right? It's like if you type in Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine today, you're not likely to find a lot of real information. You have to look up specific key events, right? And you have to be immersed in the situation to know things. And then you have to look up what's happening in Mariupol today, what's happening in Kherson today, what's happening in Kharkiv today, and then you're going to get the real information, right? But if that information, if the basic information is not provided to you, it's going to be harder for you to find the overall, right? So that's where I get incredibly, like my heart warms up when people genuinely say that they care, show that they care, and want to find resources to see what's really happening. And so that was a very, very pleasant surprise and a very pleasant gift for my birthday to me in South Carolina. And I am very grateful to everyone who is from South Carolina for accepting us so warmly, for feeling for us, for genuinely doing things, for donating, for doing drives, for finding out information, for sharing information. And that is not to say that other states don't. I'm completely not detracting from the help that the entirety of the United States have provided us. It's just that for me, it was a very, very pleasant thing to find out, especially in a place where it seems like there aren't many Ukrainians to begin with. So, you would think that people wouldn't really personally feel for it because there is no point of personal connection. Usually we feel for things more if there is a point of personal connection. So yeah, so that's what I have been wanting to say, and that's what I've been observing, and that's something that I find incredibly heartwarming. How quickly Ukraine took back northeastern Ukraine. Yeah, that was, well, everybody in Ukraine was also incredibly surprised. So have a clue here says everyone was surprised how quickly Ukraine took back northeastern Ukraine. Everyone in Ukraine was incredibly surprised to see how quickly Ukraine retook northeastern Ukraine, because that counteroffensive was incredible. I've been watching a lot of interviews with the guys and girls who served on those front lines, and they were saying that basically they saw a goal and they did not see anything standing in between them and that goal, and no obstacles. Basically, they were sleeping for 2 hours, and it was kind of like battle, 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 sleep for 2 hours, keep going, battle, battle, battle. And all of them were saying it was incredibly intense. There was a lot going on. There was no time for sleep. There was no time for rest. There was no time for really anything, but not because they were forced to do that, but because that's how they operated. They just had a goal, and they wanted to reach that goal as quickly as humanly possible and as strategically as humanly possible and liberate those towns. With that said, there is a lot that has been coming out from these towns that have been occupied. There are a lot of stories that are incredibly sad. And Zelensky yesterday said that that Izum looks terrifyingly similar to what Bucha looked like when it was first discovered after Russians have been pushed out of there. And that means that we're going to be hearing more and more about torture chambers, about filtration facilities, about filtration procedures, about the horrors that were going on in those areas. And also, as I always remind, brace yourselves, because Bucha was occupied for a little over a month. Kharkiv region was occupied for a little over 6 months. So it is a very, very, very vast difference in how much time the Russians had to commit those atrocities. And something tells me that the things we're going to find out are going to be excruciating. But those are things that everybody needs to know. With that said, yesterday, speaking of things that everybody needs to know, yesterday in the evening, I had a broadcast of breaking news because Volodymyr Zelensky was involved in a car accident and everybody in the world was freaking out. And I basically I knew that it would be breaking news in the morning. So I wanted to kind of get ahead of the curve and let everybody know he's fine. He sustained a couple of minor scratches. He had been checked out by the doctor and okayed. Everything's okay. But within that broadcast, I have also talked about World War II crimes that nobody had ever talked about and nobody had ever brought up simply because, well, nobody cared and it's inconvenient. And I have also talked about Holodomor, which was an artificial famine that was brought upon to Ukrainians by the Soviet Union, by Stalin, by Russia. And Holodomor resulted in as many as 15 million deaths within 1 year span between 1931 and 1932. Now, that is the biggest Holodomor, which quite literally translates to famine or artificial famine, event that had happened in Ukraine. But there was another one from 27 to 28 and from 45 to 46. 43 to 44, 45 to 46, I believe, or 46 to 47. So there were 3 artificial famines in Ukraine. Everybody talks about 1931 to 1932 because it was the biggest one. Up to 15 million people have died in Ukraine due to that artificial famine. It was a genocide onto Ukrainian people caused by Russia. And the deaths are staggering, and they're more than the deaths in the Holocaust. More Ukrainians died during Holodomor than Jews died during the Holocaust. And that is not to take away from the Holocaust. That is to illustrate to you how big of a magnitude of an event that was, and the fact that you have never heard about it. You have never learned about it. The majority of the world had denied to recognize it as a genocide. Can you imagine that the majority of the people all over the world have never, ever, ever heard about this event where 15 million people were starved to death? I highly recommend that you watch my yesterday's evening broadcast. It is titled Zelensky was involved in a car accident plus World War II crimes. I talk in depth about it, and I talk about being Ukrainian and growing up with this and thinking that it's okay and that we do not deserve, or the world shouldn't talk about it. It was our internal issue. It's not that big. But then growing up and learning that, the Holocaust is talked about by everybody in the world. Everybody is aware. And everybody condemns it. And everybody teaches their kids about it. And everybody talks about it in the context of never again. Because the world has never seen such a tragedy. Well, the thing is, the world hasn't seen such a tragedy because it was kept from the world on purpose, right? Why would we talk about Ukrainians? And Ukrainians we're a pretty humble people. We weren't making a huge deal out of it because we just simply didn't think that we deserved it. Same as we never thought that we deserved the world to condemn Russia, We were just fighting with it in our own right. And this had happened in 1931 to 1932, almost 10 years before the Holocaust. And again, 15 million Ukrainians, as many as 15. So it's between 8 and 15 million Ukrainians. Different resources have different numbers because it's impossible to count how many people. But the lowest number is 8 million people, which would be the same magnitude as the Holocaust. Yet no one heard about it. We have a Holocaust Remembrance Day in Ukraine, and we recognized the Holocaust as a genocide against Jews, obviously, as the country of Ukraine. Israel has never recognized Holodomor. Israel has never recognized Holodomor as a genocide against Ukrainian population, and Zelensky actually brought it up recently and said, I hope that you extend us the same understanding as we extended to you, because it's undeniable and obvious. So there is that. And in Ukraine, we also have a Holodomor Remembrance Day. So we consider both of these events immense tragedies. And that makes me understand. And that makes me understand that we as Ukrainians have been neglected by the world for a very, very long time, and we have not been extended the same courtesy as everyone else has been extended in terms of just mere respect for boundaries and for our history and the tortures that we have had to go through. Yesterday, one of our community members, one of my followers, she's Ukrainian as well, she made a comment that really resonated with me, where she said, you know, I didn't even understand how big of a trauma I've been keeping until I started telling people in the West what's considered normal Ukrainian stories, normal family stories from Ukraine, and was met with blank stares and people not knowing what to say. And I can add to that saying, you know, same here. I really never thought about how many Ukrainians have gone through these incredibly horrifying crimes against humanity that have been so normalized in our culture as something that's just another day in Ukraine. Let me start with a couple of normal family stories from Ukraine. First of all, my grandparents were moved to Ukraine from Russia to depopulate Western Ukraine. I was told that they moved during the war because of the war. No, they moved during the war because it was promoted in Russia to just move and to Western Ukraine, where everybody spoke Ukrainian, in order to promote Russian ideals and Soviet ideals in that area. So my grandparents' parents made that choice. Sort of, you know, to repopulate Ukraine with Russian people. Obviously, they weren't understanding that that's what's particularly happening, but they were encouraged to move. So that's how my Russian-speaking grandparents ended up in Ukraine. My Russian-speaking, Russian-born grandparents, it turns out they have no Russian DNA in them, but so we don't even know how they ended up, one in Siberia and one near Moscow. But yeah, that, you know, they moved from there. They were encouraged to. Let me tell you another very normal Ukrainian story. My grandmother's, on my father's side, mom gave birth to her, and then in the next week went down into the bomb shelter because Kyiv was bombed at 4 in the morning in 1941. And she spent the next of her days as a new mom, months as a new mom in a bomb shelter. Every single Ukrainian person has a friend whose dad was unalived during the 90s by the corrupt Ukrainian government that was cooperating with Russia, simply for being pro-Ukrainian and pro-independence and not wanting to revert back to the Soviet Union. Every single Ukrainian has a grandfather or a great-grandfather who had been unalived at the Finnish Winter War because they were thrown in there as cannon fodder. I'm one of those. My grandfather doesn't know who his father is for that particular reason. My I'm trying to think of what things will be shocking to you, but I feel like if you were to look at my entire family tree, that entire thing would be shocking to you, and to me, it's normal. My grandma's mom was eating soil to survive because the most affected parts of Ukraine were Western Ukraine. And that's a normal thing. You know, Ukrainian grandmas normally tell you when you don't want to eat to stop showing off because you over here don't want to eat this or that, while your great grandma had to eat soil and not complain. That's like that's like an inside joke that we have turned the tragedy into like a joke. Every single Ukrainian kid, if there are any Ukrainians here, please tell me if your grandmother would tell you that you have to eat this, because this is not why your great grandparents ate soil, for you to not like something or refuse to eat something. How dare you, right? Isn't that like a normal grandma thing to say? Because everybody's great grandparents were eating soil because there was no food. um every single person has a connection to one of the 60ers, which were the Ukrainian cultural and literary elite who were promoting Ukrainian language and Ukrainian culture and were unalived by the Russian authorities. Um, every single Ukrainian person has a relative who had been jailed or killed for speaking Ukrainian back in the day during Soviet Union, especially if you were in the Western Ukraine. This was throughout. You know, a lot of the times Russian people say, well, you know, we have, we used to be friends, and visiting our Ukrainian and visiting family in Ukraine. Well, no, you have family in Ukraine because of colonization, because your Russian family came to repopulate Ukraine after the original natives of those areas have been deliberately killed. Yes, Holodomor was 1931 to 1932. There was another one post-war in the 40s. And another one before that was 1927 to 1928. And so there were 3 Holodomors. It's just the main one was 1931 to 32. So these things are incredibly normal for Ukrainian people. Russians looking down on us and telling us, haha, your language sounds funny, and then saying, oh, our relatives in the Ukraine, you know, and we understand that we have so many relatives in Russia because Russians came here to repopulate. And we have some Ukrainian relatives in Russia because they were forced to go to Moscow to work, mostly super blue-collar jobs, in order to be able to make money because we were getting no funding. All of our resources were being taken to go to Moscow. And these stories are incredibly normal in Ukrainian families. This is just a tiny chunk, a tiny, tiny chunk of what I consider to be normal in my family. I have recently found out that my grandma's dad, who we knew was Jewish but also thought was Russian, was a Jewish man from Chernivtsi, which is a western city in Ukraine. But you know, my grandma was born in Siberia. And her dad somehow ended up in Siberia. I wonder how. We thought that my grandma was at least Russian because she too was in Siberia. It turns out that my great grandmother, is half ethnically Ukrainian, half a mix of other things. How do you think her family ended up in Siberia? That is all I have to say. That is all I have to say. And now it genuinely pains me that when people talk about, oh, thank you, Netlin, that is beautiful. It genuinely pains me that when we talk about the Holocaust, we say one of the worst tragedies known to humanity. When we talk about Holodomor, most people say, wow, I didn't know that. Or what is that? Or it can't be. Holocaust was the biggest genocide in history of the world. It's not a competition. It's just history. But our history, for some reason, does not deserve the same recognition and does not deserve the same respect. So yeah, there is that. Oh my gosh, there is a troll that came back to YouTube. Someone please come grab it. So you know how upsetting it is to be a Ukrainian person on Holodomor Remembrance Day every year to put up a candle in the memory of everybody who had died during that period of time, so also we could live. And no one in the world knowing why you do that, and no one in the world recognizing the hardships that your ancestors had to go through. And then getting to the Holocaust Remembrance Day and seeing it all over the world and seeing everybody talk about it all over the world and paying tribute to the victims. So yeah. That is, some feelings that I've never really given a lot of meaning to and that I've never really explored further than that because it was just what it was. And I never thought that, that we should have the world understand what happened to us. It was just sort of like, well, it's a Ukrainian thing. And that's just what it is. So yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the news for today. One of the biggest things that happened yesterday also was that Russia fired 8 missiles at Kyiv and struck a dam. That dam had been blown up, and currently there are a lot of areas of Kyiv that are being rapidly flooded. Now, that is an incredibly big emergency because it can result in a lot of civilian deaths. There is a partial evacuation order on the region, and this is what Kyiv region currently looks like. Thank you, Noldu. And a tragedy like that had already happened once in Zaporizhia during World War II, and nobody talks about it, and killed about 20 to 100,000 Ukrainian people. It's hard to name the number because, again, there is no official data. Kyiv is Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and this is where Zelensky is from originally. The US is actively involved in discussing the possibilities of transporting Kazakh oil through the Caspian Sea to world markets, bypassing Russia and the US State Department. Now, I mentioned it yesterday briefly, but I think that that was a brilliant move on behalf of Kazakhstan. They saw an opportunity and they seized it. They were very partnered with Russia. A lot of their assets were in Russia. A lot of their business was with Russia. And then they suddenly turned on Russia. And from the beginning of that event, I was saying right away, there is something behind it. There is no way that they just stood up to Russia and were like, no, thank you. There has to be a reason why. Because Kyiv is like kind of a dictator himself, not on the scale of Putin, but pretty dictatorial. And now this makes a lot of sense because they just realized that instead of Russia taking a cut in everything they do, they can just bypass Russia and sell oil, which will bring them much more profit than they could ever make while being partnered up with Russia. A group of creditor countries has postponed the payment of Ukraine's debt until the end of 2023, according to the website of the US Treasury. 90% of wind energy and 30% of solar energy in Ukraine have been destroyed as a result of a full-scale invasion of the Russian army, Bloomberg reports, citing research by the renewable energy think tank RAND 21 and the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Servicemen of the Armed Forces of Ukraine showed the captured T-62 of the Second Army of the World. It is worth noting that the tank was discontinued in 1975. This is how the locals of the newly liberated village greet the International Legion of Territorial Defense of Ukraine. They rejoice everyone from the French to the Americans. So I showed this video in my evening broadcast yesterday, but because a lot of you haven't seen it, I'll show it again. Героям слава! Yes, Elliot, dictatory. Well, I have a video explaining it further on my TikTok page if you're interested. She says, I wish that you all stay alive. That's the most important. I wish you all come back to your mothers. I have a son on the Kharkiv front lines.
English, speak English. Oh, французский. Да, французский. American. Да.
So this is the gist of it. Also, I saw a video of liberation of another town, and there is this woman talking about torture and talking about what she has endured and how Russians lived in the house right behind her house and how they were drinking vodka and stuff like that. And the people are asking her, they're like, well, what have you been doing the past couple of days when you have heard about the counteroffensive? And what are you planning on doing now? She's like, what have I been doing? I have been baking cakes. I have been baking cakes for the Ukrainian army because they need homemade food. And I knew they would come. I was waiting for them to come. And she's like holding a bicycle. And they're like, where are you going right now? She's like, well, I ran out of baking soda and I need to go get more baking soda because there are a lot of guys here and they all need to eat something. So I just wanted to make them homemade food. They haven't had homemade food. And this woman, like, you know, she went from talking about all of the atrocities that she has witnessed and these journalists clearly asking her, like, sort of, what have you been doing, you know, as in like, what horrible things have been happening and like, how have you been coping with it? And she's just like, Yes, I know. I was baking cakes for the Ukrainian army. The boys need to eat. She's like, I've made some homemade borscht. I'm about to go deliver it to them. And it was like the nicest, sweetest thing. She was just kind of like, you know, just like, what do you mean what I've been doing? I've been thinking of how to feed a whole army, a whole army of hungry Ukrainian men. Like, how do I do this? And so she was just sort of like, and these are people who were living in occupation. You know, they did not have a lot of food. They didn't have food at all, to be honest. They were sharing food, right, in order to survive. And this woman just like sort of took the word for it and was like, okay, well, the Ukrainian army is coming to liberate me. I'm going to use everything I have in my house and I'm just going to make them food because they need to eat something. Like, they haven't been eating well in the trenches. And that was just so, you know, that was so incredible. And that's just kind of like the core of Ukrainian people. And so here is something that I saw Cool Hand said, and I wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. Also, the 1st Guards Tank Army has been rendered combat ineffective. So the 1st Guards Tank Army is a Russian Special Forces army that is the most elite battalion that Russians have. Hi, Anvar. The most elite battalion that Russians have that has been trained to repel a NATO invasion and to protect Moscow. And that battalion has been rendered completely combat ineffective. I think it was in the Kharkiv region that it was destroyed, and it did not take a lot of time to destroy it. So, hey, NATO, if you were worried about what Russia has in store for you, well, they had that. Emphasis on had. Anyways, on the wall of one of the cells in the police station in Balaklia, it's a town liberated in Kharkiv, where local people were tortured, BBC journalists found the carved text of the Lord's Prayer with the notches of how many days had passed in detention. Volodymyr Zelensky's chevron says Ukraine or death, or Ukraina чи смерть. Ukraina або смерть. And this is what the chevron looks like, and this is what he was wearing in Izum. Oh, sorry. This is Zelensky, and this is his chevron, and it says Ukraine or death. And the video that you are just about to see is actually incredibly heartwarming. It's palate cleansing for all of the terrifying news. And it's 7th grade students greeting their teacher, Roman Palamarchuk, who just came back to them from the front lines. Take a look. I'm not going to play you the whole video. It's long, but... Oh, it's so cool, Tony. Sorry, you told me why. This is what liberation looks like. Not those fake propaganda videos of stiff people standing there and saying, thank you so much, Russian soldiers, we were waiting for you for so long. This is what liberation looks like. This is what people happy to see their defenders looks like. These are kids hugging their teacher who came back from the front lines. This is what respect looks like. This is what a nation looks like. This is what love for your culture looks like. This is what gratitude looks like. Not those fake videos of Russian soldiers coming to villages and people standing there stiff like this saying, thank you so much. We have been waiting for you for a very long time. This is what it looks like. Nearly 5,000 Ukrainian servicemen successfully completed the training with the participation of instructors from Canada, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom itself. They received basic knowledge, skills, and abilities in tactical medicine, engineering, fire safety, psychological and tactical training, including offensive and defensive operations in urbanized terrain. Also, guys, just a gentle reminder, don't forget to like this stream and don't forget to send it and share it to your friends or whoever you think might be interested in it, because it's, that way more people can hear and learn. So yesterday I showed a trailer for a movie called Bucha that's supposed to come out, on the first anniversary of the events in Bucha, and it's based on real events. It's based on real stories of survivors, and it's based on real events. And if you remember the Schindler's List and how difficult it was to watch that, well, this is basically the Schindler's List of Ukraine. I'm going to show you this trailer. I played it full screen in yesterday's broadcast. If you'd like to, you can see it there. I am going to stop short before a shot. And if you'd like to see the full trailer, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called Bucha teaser trailer. Or you can look at it in my previous. Actually, here's the thing. We're going to do it a little differently because there are subtitles on that video and it's in Russian. So I would say, actually, please watch my broadcast from yesterday, or please look it up on YouTube, because unless I play it full screen, unless I do a full setup, you're not going to understand anything. And that trailer is it's in my previous broadcast. I do think it's important to see it. It is going to come out next year, most likely. It is a very heartbreaking movie, and it is based on real events. It is about as stomach-turning to watch as the Schindler's List was. So if you're going to look up the trailer, there is not a lot of gore, but it is very emotionally taxing. So please be prepared for that. It's a short trailer. It's 2.5 minutes, but it leaves a mark. It leaves a mark. The European Union extended for 6 months the sanctions against 1,206 individuals and 108 legal entities of Russia, imposed in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war on February 24th. The Russians hit the Inhulets Dam in Kryvyi Rih with Iskander and Kinzhal missiles. Due to the attack, the water level rose from 1 to almost 2 meters in different parts of the Inhulets River. So far, it has been reduced by 13 centimeters. The water has already flooded 112 residential buildings, and the impact of the rocket has damaged several water pipes. Almost 5,000 people are without water in the Sofiivka community. Restoration work continues. Here is what that looks like. Take a look. Here it is again. That's the water level. In the region. So actually, Ollie over here on YouTube says something very clever, and I'm going to put it over here and I'm going to read it out. So I've called all of my representatives and told them that if they don't vote to define Russia as a terrorist state, I will be volunteering or working for their primary general opponents and the ones in neighboring districts. And I urge any American to do the same. That is actually an incredibly clever strategy to let your representatives know exactly what you want them to do. So if you have a moment, I would highly suggest that you do the same, because trust me, your constituents and your voices matter. They matter, and your representatives are going to listen to them because they do not want to lose your vote. And this is a language that would make me consider doing what I'm asked for. Because it's not just like, oh, I'm not going to vote for you. It's like, no, I'm going to do everything possible to make your opponent win. Kazakhstan transferred trade with Russia under US sanctions control. This was reported in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan and added that now no agreements will be signed without the consent of US officials. This decision has made in order to not fall under secondary sanctions. Was made. Russian nuclear terrorism threatens the whole world. It is necessary to stop the aggressor as soon as possible, liberate the occupied territories, demilitarize the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and return it under the control of Ukraine. The world must say no to Russian nuclear terrorism. Here is the image that it came with. Forrest says, my senator is Rand Paul. He never had my vote. Does he know that, though? Does he know that he didn't have your vote? You can still call him and tell him that you are a constituent and that, you are highly considering voting for someone else. He doesn't need to know. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has arrived in Kyiv. This is already her third visit since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation of Ukraine. Which, again, her visiting so much is signaling to Russia very clearly that the EU is behind Ukraine. It's her third visit, and with every visit, it signals more and more how Ukraine ties and bonds to the European Union, and that the European Union will stand behind Ukraine. And it might just seem like a visit, and it might just seem like nothing too important. But all of these visits from EU officials, especially as frequent as they have been becoming, are incredibly important. And they signal incredibly important things. Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Alexei Danilov, stated that as a result of the September counterattack by the Ukrainian armed forces, the ratio of Ukrainian and Russian casualties was 1 to 9. For one of our unfortunately fallen warrior, there are 9 to 10 unalived Russians who invaded our land. Ukrainian defense forces attacked Russian positions in the east of the Kharkiv region, north and west of the Luhansk region, and northern Donbas near Liman, Institute for the Study of War concludes. Meanwhile, the Russians are withdrawing air defense assets deep into the territory and turning off mobile communications in the temporarily occupied territory of the Luhansk region to control the information situation in the region and avoid mass flight of troops and collaborators to Russian territory. Well, that is not necessarily super smart of them to do, because since they have turned off all of the cell service and communication, so Russians couldn't communicate, their phones started connecting to Ukrainian cell service. And the second that happens, they receive a text message basically from the authorities of Ukraine saying, here, consider surrendering, and if you surrender, you can save your life and you can guarantee your safe exchange back to your homeland. And a lot of Russians actually have been taking that offer up and actually have been doing that. Because, well, they'd rather surrender and be in Ukraine and be a POW than to stay in Russia and fight. So Russia kind of screwed itself over in that one. Then there have been incredibly big battles for the village of Kyselivka, which is 25 kilometers away from Kherson, which is very close. There was information yesterday, as I said, allegedly that it was liberated by the Ukrainian forces. It wasn't fully liberated, but there is battles going on there, and that village is incredibly important because the next one is Chornobayevka, and the next one is Kherson. And Chornobayevka is where Russians were trying to set up a base at the airfield or air base, and they weren't able to do so because the way that it was positioned, Ukrainians kept destroying them times and times over, and it's now over 30 times that their entire battalions of troops and equipment have been destroyed in that one area. And so when Ukrainians take Kyselivka, Chornobayevka is a no-brainer, and then it's Kherson. So Russians started bringing over bridge parts to Crimea in order to make passage from Crimea to Kherson, to quicker supply ammunition and bodies to Kherson region, because they fully understand that the Ukrainian counteroffensive there is going to be staggering, and so they're trying to prepare. Ukrzaliznytsia resumed railway connection with the de-occupied Balaklia. The first trip to Balaklia, and immediately a full train of passengers returned home. Already we imagine the first trips to Donetsk and Simferopol, reads Ukrzaliznytsia's post. Donetsk and Simferopol have been occupied since 2014. Donetsk is the biggest city in Donetsk region, and Simferopol is the biggest city in Crimea. Volodymyr Zelensky talked to the English actor Benedict Cumberbatch. The president thanked the actor for his solidarity with our state and citizens. Cumberbatch has been helping Ukrainian refugees, and he even offered parts of his house to temporarily protected Ukrainian refugees. So that is very interesting. Also, I noticed on this photo that they kind of maybe look a little alike when Cumberbatch has this like beard situation going on. So do we think he could play Zelensky in his inevitable biography on screen? I feel like that could happen. Like, look here, Zelensky. Cumberbatch. That could work. He would have to dye his hair for a little bit, but they do that for a role. Way too tall, I know, but no one's gonna look at there, this is not how screens work. Also, over here on Twitch, I have a person who followed me with a name White Trash, and then asked me if I get paid by the Ukraine Gov to shill for them. First of all, if you think that I am so good at my job that I deserve to be paid, thank you. I know that's a compliment. So if you feel like I deserve to be paid for bringing information over to social media channels, I agree. Do you want to start and send me a paycheck? I would love that. I'll take it. It's fine. It's cool. If you feel like I should be paid, you are welcome to write to the government of Ukraine and tell them that I should be paid. I would love that. Thank you. If you get me a full-time job with the Ukrainian government, I will be so happy. So happy. The Lithuanian government will decide to send 2 batches of armored personnel carriers to Ukraine, the Minister of Foreign Affairs reported. A decision has been made to send 2 batches of armored personnel carriers. The first of them will arrive shortly. Olaf Scholz said that German weapons played a decisive role in the recent successes of the Ukrainian army. I'm sorry, pardon me, what now? Germany was supposed to transfer a bunch of Gepards to Ukraine, and Scholz's government quite literally, you know what, I'll read you the tweet. I will read you that information because here's the thing, I repost a lot of stuff on Twitter because Twitter is an information hub. I don't repost anything if it hasn't been verified. If it hasn't been verified, then I will say allegedly. I will never say that, you know, this is news and this is correct. But here is the thing that I wanted to say. 1 second. Let me find you those news. I did retweet a lot of stuff yesterday. I did post a lot of stuff yesterday, so sometimes it's kind of hard to find things. But there was an article about Scholz's government pretty much blocking the supply of pre-agreed upon. Here, the German company Rheinmetall prepared 16 Marder infantry fighting vehicles for Ukraine. The Scholz government refuses to issue an export license. History will judge Germany harshly for failing to do enough to stop the genocide of Ukrainians by the Russian fascist invaders. Here is an interesting thing. You know, then Scholz called Putin and suggested that Putin should capitulate. And I'm like, you really don't want to send those tanks, do you? Yes, my handle everywhere is the same as here. So here David is asking, is her handle on Twitter the same as here? So my handle everywhere across all platforms that I'm on is the same as here. It's at Yulia on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitch, and on TikTok. I also do have a Patreon, and I do mention it every stream. If you've heard it a lot of times, I'm so sorry. But I do have a Patreon, and every single subscription does go a long way, and it helps me be able to bring the news to you every day. So if you're interested in supporting my efforts in my journalism, please find me on Patreon and give it a chance. There is a lot of information that you won't be getting over here, or you will be getting it first, because it is a tighter community with no trolls, and I don't feel like I have to filter what I'm sharing as much. And also because, well, you are getting some of the exclusive access. So you'll also be getting merch after 3 months of consecutive subscription. And my Patreon is Spy News Network INTL, or Spy News Network International. It's also in my link in bio on all of my social media, and it's in the About section on YouTube if you're interested. And then, yes, so our channel technically is called Spy News Network International, because in the beginning of my channel, before a lot of you guys were here or even heard of me, there were a lot of trolls saying that I am a paid CIA agent pretending to be Ukrainian because I don't sound Ukrainian enough. And yeah, that is, you know, that is how I embraced my role as a spy. And for a while, I would joke and say your favorite Ukrainian American spy in all of my videos. But then I realized, you know, we now have a news network and a community. So it's not just about me. It's about all of us spies. So we called it Spy News Network INTL International, because all of us are from everywhere. So that's the story behind it and how I embraced my look as a spy. Okay. The water level in Inhulets has dropped by 40 centimeters and continues to fall. The head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, Valentin Reznichenko, reported this. Recall that yesterday the Russian army struck the dam in Kryvyi Rih with Iskander and Kinzhal missiles. As a consequence, more than 100 residential buildings were flooded. A civilian airplane took off from Ukraine. On Tuesday, September 13th, a Wizz Air airplane, which was stuck in Ukraine a few months ago, received permission to take off from Lviv. This is the first civilian plane to depart from Ukraine since February 24th. That is incredibly big news, and the fact that they wrote about it means that the airplane made it to its destination, and everything went smoothly. And therefore, so a couple of months ago, there was talk about renewing flights from Lviv airport, depending on the course of the war. Thank you, Angela. And asking for guarantees for those planes to be able to take off from the European Union, basically. saying that they guarantee protection for these airplanes. So if something were to happen or Russia was trying to take it down, the EU would step in. And so I don't know if this airplane took off on that condition, but this airplane took off. So that means that there might be flights resumed from Lviv. With that said, I don't know if I would be traveling to Lviv by airplane. I would probably still land in Warsaw, and I would probably still take a train from Warsaw to Lviv. Hi, Scooter. But nonetheless, you know, that would be like one of those final destination things where you have a 50-50 chance of landing. And I don't know if that's the I don't know if that's a chance I'd like to take, but I think that mostly these civilian planes are not going to be used for travel like that. They're probably going to be used for evacuations. They're probably going to be used for delivering supplies. They're probably going to be used for things other than somebody just traveling to Ukraine or traveling from Ukraine. And these flights are most likely going to be incredibly limited. Russia hit Kryvyi Rih with missiles again. There is a hit in an industrial enterprise. The damage is serious. The detailed consequences are being clarified. Preliminarily, no casualties, said the head of the city military administration, Alexander Vikul. The Russian invaders destroyed an apartment building in Bakhmut, Donetsk region. According to preliminary information, 4 people may be under the rubble. The State Emergency Service of Ukraine is working at the site. Russia does not recognize its passports, which were issued in the territory of the self-proclaimed DPR and LPR. Passport holders are not allowed to cross the border, reports the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Oh, so all of the people who received Russian passports in Donetsk and Luhansk, People's Republic, so pseudo republics, are now not allowed to cross the border into Russia, although they're Russian citizens, right? So now Russia is leaving them behind and basically fleeing and not even giving them equal rights. But I thought they came to liberate those citizens from the mean Ukrainians. But now they're not letting those citizens cross the border. How does that work? I thought it was a liberation of Russian speakers in Ukraine who are Russian citizens. I'm curious. Why would they not let Russian citizens back into Russia? The Ukrainian Yazis are coming for them. Come on. Gap says it's almost like they were used like as pawns. Yeah. Agreed. Look at that. I thought that, Ukraine has been bombing Donbass for the past 8 years. And these people were in safety under Russia. Well, now, Ukraine is launching a massive counteroffensive on Donetsk and Luhansk as well. And what do you mean? These people, they must be protected from the Ukrainian Yazis. And they can't even go back home to Russia where they're in safety. Russia has one of these mottos, and it says, we do not leave our own behind. Своих не бросаем. Yeah, it really feels like you can really see their dedication to that quote when you see random Russian soldiers falling out of a tank that's running away from the Ukrainian forces and no one bothers to collect them. Oh, and with this, obviously, because all of these Russian citizens who could be going back to the motherland are not allowed to cross the border. And that to you is the proof that Russia never cared about these people. Russia cared about the oil and gas deposits that were found in these regions, and Russia cared about territory, and Russia cared about colonizing, and Russia cared about terrorism, and Russia cared about Nazism and fascism, and Russia cared about making these people an excuse to fulfill their imperialistic dreams. As a result of the unexpected offensive of the armed forces of Ukraine, one of the most powerful groups of the Russian invasion army, which was in Izum, practically ceased to exist. It loomed over Slavyansk and Kramatorsk from the north and was supposed to help the occupiers fulfill the task of Russian dictator Putin to completely liberate Donbass by September 16th. Minister of Defense Alexei Reznikov has stated that the counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kharkiv region went much better than expected. However, it is too early to celebrate the victory. Here is a video from Ukraine now, which is, you know what that means. That means I'm going to download it and I'm going to play it here and I'm going to set it up over here. So you're going to witness me struggling with all the cameras and all this stuff as per usual, because you know I'm great at that. I'm fantastic with technology. Technology seems to love me back so much. Okay, let me send it over to myself. No. Or rather, send it over to my computer. If you're gonna put M&Ms on a plate, I will deal with you the same way that Ukrainians are dealing with Russian invaders. This kid loves coming in and eating M&Ms as loud as humanly possible while I'm doing news broadcasts.
I mean, like, I do specify you almost.
Oh yeah, he's like putting the M&Ms into a plate, and so it's like. Sini. Vasil ASMR. Oh my gosh, it's not ASMR. Do not enable him. Alrighty. Oh, my mic was off, so I was sorry. Sorry, everybody on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. What I was saying is that Sini, as a bulldog, she sometimes gets like inflammations in her paw folds, and it looks like she has one now, and she starts licking them, and that only makes things worse. So I'm not letting her lick them, because that just results in more inflammation. And I usually I have like special wipes that like sanitize everything and make these allergies better. It's a very normal bulldog thing. But if she's going to continue licking her paws, it's not going to help, and it is not going to result in the results that we want. And so on TikTok, thank you, Netlin. And so on TikTok, basically, a lot of people were seeing like me in the background being like, Cindy, stop it, stop it. She was like going at her paws. So I was explaining what was happening and why I was like rolling Cindy over, because sometimes she just won't let me like kind of pick up her head, so I have to quite literally roll her over, and I react very fast because I'm like, no, you're licking your paws. Cindy, come here. Hey, Grumps, come here. Come here, Grumps. 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 Okay, fine. Fine, as long as you don't eat your paws. Okay. Yeah, I do give her a shot sometimes, but things like this usually don't require a shot necessarily, so I don't want to bring her to the vet and like have her, go through an annoying thing for no reason. Usually this will go away if I just clean her paws properly. It usually happens if something gets stuck in between her little folds from just like walking. The Ukrainian Air Force shot down 4 Russian aircraft over the past day. One Su-25 jet aircraft of the Russian Air Forces was shot down in the eastern direction, and 3 Su-24 attack aircraft were shot down in the south of the country. Border guards freed 5 teenagers who had been held in a basement by the Russian invaders. As it turned out, by the time they were released, 4 girls and a boy had been in the basement for 7 days. The teenagers, residents of Kupiansk, Izum, and Chuhuiv districts, were students of an educational institution, future doctors. Sinunya, stop it, baby. Stop it, baby. Stop it. I know. I'm gonna. I see. Yes. Stop licking it. Stop licking it. And we'll deal with it after the stream. Okay? No. Cindy, stop it. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm over here quite literally holding Cindy's foot so she doesn't. Okay. The armed forces of Ukraine have advanced 110 kilometers in 5 days of fighting and liberated almost 400 settlements in the Kharkiv region. Almost the entire Kharkiv region has been deoccupied, Zelensky said. Sini, stop it. I'm sorry, 1 second. I do have a... Come here, Sin, come, okay, lay, come on, lay down. Okay, come on, here, there we go, good girl. Australia will allocate 500 million euros for the construction of Ukrainian hospitals. It is about equipping Ahmedud Children's Hospital, the construction of a modern university hospital in Kyiv, and the creation of the National Rehabilitation Center in Lviv, which will most likely be used a lot by Ukrainian military who had suffered severe injuries. The European Parliament has approved a 5 billion macro-financial assistance package for Ukraine, reported Radio Liberty journalist Rikard Yozviak. This loan complements the 10 billion that the European Union has already provided to Ukraine in the form of a financial, humanitarian, and military aid. Kickerbuds, Grumpy does not speak Ukrainian. And I don't think he censored you. I think there is Nightbot, and Nightbot is like this automated system that just doesn't let anyone post links, and it gets very annoyed when someone sends emojis. So like, and we can't tame it. That's just what it is. Ukrainian hackers claimed responsibility for the breakdown of the official website of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, which showed its helplessness during the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. You have a hole in collective security. The CSTO is such a worthless organization that it is unable to protect even its website, reads on the Cyber Movement's page. So CSTO is like the Russian alternative to NATO. They started it, and they basically did and they did. No need to apologize. I was just saying that he doesn't speak Ukrainian. But basically, yes. Yes, Aaron, I am on YouTube Live. Sorry, but basically, CSTO is like the alternative to NATO that Russia has, and they started it and they created it, and they basically are trying to say that this is the analogy to NATO, and that this is just as powerful as NATO is, and it consists of like Kazakhstan, Armenia, I believe Tajikistan, and so their own website wasn't able. Senior, I love you, but stop it. Wasn't able to be protected because Ukrainian hackers hacked into it, and this is supposed to be like the NATO level of organization. A man who lost his relatives as a result of Russian shelling in the Zhytomyr region has appealed to the court in The Hague. In March, 42-year-old Volodymyr Obodzinski from the village of Yurivka in the Zhytomyr region lost all of his relatives in the blink of an eye. The Russians dropped two 500-kilogram bombs on his house and unalived 3 generations of the family. His 40-year-old wife, Natalia, 14-year-old son, Volodymyr, 19-year-old daughter, Ivanna, and 1-year-old grandchildren, Veronika and Denis. They died that day physically, and I died mentally, Volodymyr said. His goal now is to leave this crime of the Russians alone. Thus, he directed an appeal to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. This is a picture of his family. The assets of Russians worth 189 million were arrested in Finland. According to the bailiff service, the arrests concerned several dozen organizations included in the EU sanctions list. Azerbaijan says 71 Azerbaijani servicemen were killed this week in clashes on the border with Armenia. Germany will send 50 Dingo armored vehicles to Ukraine. Well, if they will. German economics minister Robert Habeck also said the country would hand over even more weapons to Ukraine because of Kyiv's ability to win. Well, hi Isaac. Well, here's an interesting thing. Germany consistently keeps announcing the things that they're going to send to Ukraine, and then what happens next is nothing. Quite literally, they just don't send it. They announce it. They say how they're going to help Ukraine, and then they proceed to not do it. So I will believe it when I see it, because so far Germany has not held up their end of the deal at any point, or rather held up their promises. There is no deal, really. The destruction inflicted by the invaders in Izum is comparable in scale with the destruction in several Borodyankas, and in terms of the number of victims, with at least 2 Buchas. This was stated by advisor to the head of the Ministry of Defense, Oleksiy Kopytko. This is what I was saying, that it's going to be far larger and far worse than Bucha in a lot of extents. Zelensky met with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in Kyiv. Part of the negotiations took place in a tete-a-tete format. The parties discussed a number of topical issues. Undisclosed. The building of the Russian customs on the border of Ukraine and Russia is on fire. Here's what that looks like. There are more Ukrainians who are not ready for any territorial concessions for the sake of ending the war. At present, 87% of those polled consider any territorial concessions in order to achieve peace to be unacceptable. In July, they were 84%. Even the inhabitants of the eastern regions where acute hostilities are taking place are against the concessions. This position is supported by 85% of the inhabitants of the region. Cindy, come here. The bill was introduced by Democrat Richard Blumenthal and Republican Lindsey Graham when recognizing Russia as a terrorist state. The bill has already been submitted to the upper house of the Congress. The need for this measure is more urgent than ever, Blumenthal said at a press conference. The US imposes sanctions against Kadyrov and members of his family, according to various different media sources. Let me remind you, Kadyrov is the Chechen. Sorry. 1 second. Sorry. Come on. Stop it, baby. Stop it. Kadyrov is the Chechen army general / president who had betrayed Chechnya in the Second Chechen War, and his dad did, and effectively gave it up to Russia, making it not independent and making it a Russian proxy. And his troops are the TikTok troops, or those guys who keep saying that they are so brutal and they are so worth to be scared of, and then they come to Ukraine, they die like flies, and they also don't know what they're doing in the battlefields, as they are just simply militia. And the only people that might be scared of them are civilians, because they are brutal against unarmed people. And they also film TikToks to show how effective they are on the battlefield fighting against empty buildings, walls, and fields. The US still refuses to transfer ATA-CMS long-range missile systems to Ukraine. It is reported by CNN, citing sources. The Biden administration continues to believe that providing ATA-CMS systems with range of up to 300 kilometers could escalate, as they could be used to bomb Russian territory. These are such ridiculous excuses at this point, because it's very clear that we are not going to be bombing the Russian territory. At this point, we are at the border in Kharkiv. This excuse doesn't even work anymore, because we are in Kharkiv at the border. We could bomb the Russian territory easily if we wanted to with the weapons we have right now. Because even with the 20-kilometer range weapons, we can still bomb the Russian territory, but we're not going to do that, obviously. So that excuse is just ridiculous. All we need those long-range weapons for is quite literally to liberate our territories and to destroy the Kerch Bridge, through which Russia brings most of their equipment in. Obtaining air defense systems is one of the priorities for Ukraine. They will protect citizens and civilian infrastructure from constant attacks from Russia, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said after a meeting with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The IAEA Council adopted a resolution calling the Russian Federation to withdraw its troops from the territory of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Reuters reports. Russia and China voted against the adoption of the resolution. How can Russia still vote? How can Russia vote in the Security Council or in the IAEA Council if they are the subject of that vote? It's it's quite obvious that you can't vote if it concerns you, because you are not an impartial party. The permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the UN called the document anti-Russian, noting that it was dragged by Western countries. And this is why Russia should be expelled from the permanent spot on the UN mission. Ursula von der Leyen was treated to a watermelon from a liberated village in the Kherson region. The photo was published by the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Mati Maasikas. It says, due to the courage of our soldiers and the diligently planned counteroffensive actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, 5 villages were recently liberated: Vysokopilya, Novovoznesenske, Bilogorivka, Myrolubivka, and Sukhy Stavok. Kherson region is one of the leaders in the cultivation of watermelon and melon crops. Kherson watermelons are known for their quality far beyond the region's borders. They are some kind of a staple of a region. Today, we would like to treat you with the watermelons and melons grown in the recently deoccupied villages. And this is what the meal looked like that von der Leyen received. And all I can say, while being super happy as a designer, is what in the F is wrong with that tracking? Why are all of these letters like this? And this is what happens when you're doing something last minute and you don't have a graphic designer on the job, because what is happening here, what we're witnessing, is that there is this function in Photoshop, Illustrator, and every Adobe program where you can just stretch out the words in a paragraph so they all end and begin at the same place on both borders. They're flush left and right, basically. But here is a funny thing. Normally, nobody does that unless you're willing to manually go in and fix these things, because normally it makes it look that patchy and botchy. So let me show it to you again, because everybody else was staring at watermelons. Look at this. Look at this top paragraph. What is these? What are these spaces? This is what you got an F for in design school, and this is what you would be fired for, because this is basics. Now, I do love my country, and I understand it's about the melons and the watermelons, not about design. But the designer in me is hurting. Hurting very much. The name of Ursula von der Leyen was minted on the Walk of Fame in Kyiv. If you don't know, the Walk of Fame has been created in Kyiv, and it is basically the Walk of Fame of people who have helped the liberation of Ukraine. And this is her own nameplate on that Walk of Fame. It's kind of like the Walk of Fame in LA, but instead of famous actors and famous musicians and people just famous for their kind of like accomplishments in the cultural sphere, it is a Walk of Fame of people who have helped Ukraine's independence. It's not a joke. At the abandoned positions of the Russians, an atlas of the USSR highways was found. The Atlas of Automobile Roads, USSR. This is what they were using to navigate Ukrainian highways. Just FYI, it has been 31 years. I understand that in Russia, that is basically like 5 minutes in terms of infrastructure improvement, and whatever roads and infrastructure they had in the USSR still tracks today. But in Ukraine, none of that works. You know, there's like new highways, there are like new facilities. There are all of these advancements, not even advancements, they're just change that happens within roads, you know, in a 31-year span. So it is very, very interesting to me how they've been using these maps. I also wonder how their command ship with a straight face gave that to them. Do they genuinely not know that this wouldn't track? Because if you look at the USSR maps of Russia, they are still the same, because that's what it feels like. Also, I'm sorry, my little gremlin over here. Can I help you, little crazy creature? She's quite literally eating my hand right now. And people on TikTok can witness it. She's having a bit of a zoomies moment. Sini, can I help you, lady? Will you stop just being a crazy beast creature? Sini. Okay. New U.S. sanctions target Russia's space defense capabilities and high-tech manufacturing, the State Department said. So this is all I have from news sources other than Kyiv Independent. We're going to read a couple of updates from Kyiv Independent. Some of them I read out yesterday, but we're going to do everything that came in today. So as of midnight Eastern Standard, just for quick facts. Some of them might be repeat. So if you were here from the very beginning, you have heard them already, and some of them will be new, but this is just like sort of quick bullet points. Russia strikes Kharkiv overnight. European Commission allocates 5 million euros to support Ukrainian artists. Ukrainian air defense destroyed 4 Russian planes. Russian forces strike Zaporizhia again. Prosecutor General's office says Russian war has killed at least 384 children, injured 750 since February 24th. Russian forces killed 2 people, injured 13 in Donetsk Oblast. According to Pavlo Kirilenko, 2 civilians were unalived in Dolina on September 14th. It is currently impossible to estimate the exact number of victims in Mariupol and Volnovakha, as they are under severe occupation. Ursula von der Leyen arrives in Kyiv to discuss progress towards EU accession. This is European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's third visit to Ukraine since the start of Russia's full-scale war. Russian missile attacks on a dam flood over 100 homes in Lviv. Zelensky speaks with Benedict Cumberbatch. Sin, stop it. Sin, I understand, but you're Sin. Seriously, please give me a break. Why now? Why? Why are you going insane? Come here. Come here. Come here, Sin. No, you gotta let me put this on. Sinny. I swear. Sinny. No, you're not. You're not gonna become a gremlin right now. Come here. Come here. Oh my gosh. If you just saw this dog right now, she's 2.5 years old. And she's going through terrible twos the same way as kids do, you know? EU extends sanctions against 1,206 individuals, 108 entities due to Russia's war. UK intelligence says Russian forces withdraw in panic from parts of Kharkiv Oblast as Ukrainian forces establish control. The UK Defense Ministry said on September 15th that Russian forces have largely withdrawn from the area west of Oskil River. While some Russian troops have withdrawn in relatively good order, others have fled in apparent panic. High-volume equipment abandoned by fleeing Russian troops reportedly highlights this disorganized threat of many units. I'm sorry. Hey. Shh. No. Shh. Okay. Lithuania to send armored personnel carriers to Ukraine. IMF appoints new mission chief for Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund has appointed Gavin Gray, who previously served as its Iraq mission chief, as its new mission chief for Ukraine. Gray will take on the new role on September 20th. National Corruption Prevention Agency files protocols against Chernihiv mayor. Protocols have been filed against Chernihiv mayor Vladislav Atroshenko for corruption and conflict of interests. Interfax Ukraine news agency reported. Investigation Bureau detains 3 collaborators in Izum and Kupiansk. Russia launches missile strikes on Kryvyi Rih again. 2023 draft budget excludes money for Ukrainian parliamentary elections. Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko said that martial law, which is expected to remain in force until 2023, does not permit the holding of elections, reports Suspilne news outlet. Elections will resume once martial law has ended. Russia launches missile strike on industrial site in Kryvyi Rih. Ukraine has exported 3.33 million metric tons of grain since UN-backed deal. Teenagers rescued from Russian captivity in Kharkiv Oblast. The State Border Guard Service said it rescued 5 teenagers aged 15 to 17 in recently liberated Kupiansk who were locked in a basement for 7 days by Russian troops. 91% of Ukrainians trust Ukraine's armed forces based on a poll. Military administration to be established in every municipality of Luhansk Oblast. Luhansk Oblast Governor Serhiy Haidai said numerous officials in the region collaborated with Russian forces, meaning new administrations will soon be established to replace them. City Council reports protests in Russian-occupied Mariupol due to lack of electricity and water supply. According to the Mariupol City Council, some of the local residents say they haven't had electricity or water supply for over 2 months. They protested to demand from the occupying forces to resolve these issues ahead of the winter, the council reported on September 15th. SBU identifies collaborators, heads of Russian occupying forces in Kharkiv Oblast. Russia threatens US to react if it provides Ukraine with long-range weapons. According to the Russian state-controlled news agency RIA Novosti, Russian Foreign Ministry said on September 15 that if the US provides long-range missiles to Ukraine, it will make them a party to the conflict, and Russia will respond to it. Earlier on July 22nd, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that Washington was not ready to provide Ukraine with long-range weapons so that the world doesn't end up heading towards a third world war. Investigative Bureau starts probe into traffic accident involving Zelensky. According to the State Investigation Bureau, a civilian car hit the car of President Volodymyr Zelensky and the accompanying vehicles in Kyiv suburbs on September 14th. The presidential office earlier reported that Zelensky wasn't seriously injured in the accident. Ukraine receives first tranche of 500 million euros from European Investment Bank. Kyselivka village in Kherson Oblast was not liberated yet. Hostilities continue. Mykolaiv Oblast Governor Vitaly Kim said on September 15th that the earlier reports that the village of Kyselivka in the neighboring southern Kherson Oblast were false. Kim said that fighting over the village continues amid Ukraine's counteroffensive in the south. European Parliament approves €5 billion loan to Ukraine. From the recent analysis by Andriy Zahorodnyuk, ex-defense minister and the chairman of the Center for Defense Strategies, the past life of the Russian Federation is crumbling. The image of a reliable and immovable rock, the Russian armed forces, has been shattered. Now Russian soldiers' main exercise is to avoid becoming victims of yet another failure of their army. Explosions reported in Russian-occupied Melitopol. Ukraine reports destroying Russian military base in Novakhovka, Kherson Oblast. Novakhovka is a very important strategic hub. Fleeing Russian troops ruined energy facility, leaving 5,000 residents of Balaklia, Kharkiv Oblast without gas. Let me see what this is. Okay, this is a video that I would like to send here, and I would like to play you on full screen because I think that it's very good and it's important to read. It's a message about power lines, and it's made by Kyiv Independent, which recently has started doing these video formats too. And to be very frank, I really enjoy that Ukrainian news sources are now kind of coming to this format of doing these short video explanations, because I think they're very useful, and I think that they provide for a lot of info that otherwise would have been harder to access and understand. Okay. Alrighty. Gosh, Sin, why are you so difficult today?
Message heard and the Kyiv Independent. This is Power Lines, from Ukraine to the world. My name is Jakub Parushinsky.
And I'm Anastasia Lopatina.
We're from the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine's English-language media outlet, founded by journalists who walked out of the Kyiv Post to keep journalistic integrity alive.
We've been used to covering the turbulent ups and downs of politics in our country. But then overnight, our lives changed. Across 12 episodes, we will be following the undercurrents of the war from Kyiv to Beijing and Moscow to DC.
We'll be talking to journalists on the ground and experts from across the world to explore the impact and influence of the war on geopolitics, global power structures, and of course, the Ukrainian people.
Beginning in Kyiv and following the roads out wherever they may lead.
Subscribe and listen to Power Lines wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes out every fortnight from the 22nd of September.
So that is a new podcast that they're releasing about everything that's been happening. And I think that that's a very valuable resource. And if you're interested in finding out more information, I would say that you look up that podcast and you listen to it. Oh my gosh, Cindy, what did you find? No, oh my God. Cindy, you can't eat this. Oh my God. What is this even? Where did she find this piece of plastic? How does this dog manage to do this? Official reports state another missile strike on Kryvyi Rih as of 11:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Russia launches missiles at Kirovograd Oblast. According to Bild, Germany to provide Ukraine with 50 Dingo armored vehicles. Well, if they do. U.S. investors raise $30 million to fund Ukrainian startups. Over the next 5 to 10 years, U.S. firm FF Venture Capital will invest in 15 to 20 early-stage startups founded by Ukrainian entrepreneurs or employing Ukrainian refugees. U.S. imposes new sanctions against Kadyrov, Russian official involved in deportation of Ukrainian children. CNN, U.S. not inclined to provide Ukraine with ATA-CMS missiles. U.S. orders 1,800 javelins to replenish those sent to Ukraine. Ukraine bans Kremlin-linked opposition platform for Life Party. According to SBU, that's the platform that has been leaking. That is the opposition party in the Ukrainian government that has been temporarily suspended during martial law because they have been leaking information to Russia, and now they have been permanently banned. Russia attacks Zaporizhzhia Oblast with cluster munitions. Von der Leyen, EU's gas imports from Russia decreased from 40% to 9% since February and will drop further. Ukraine registers first monkeypox case, and governor reports fire at a checkpoint in Russia's Belgorod region bordering Ukraine. You need a Cine minder. Well, Cine normally sleeps. I don't know what's her deal today. Hey, baby, come here. And that is all the news that I had for today. So let's dive into discussion answers. Well, answers, questions and answers. And tonight, the live that I have planned later is actually about what will happen if Russia falls apart onto different republics. Because what we might be witnessing right now is the falling apart of the Russian Empire. Cine does need her own TikTok. Here is something that I will show you, and you're only going to be able to see it on TikTok because, Cine, what were you just doing? Why did you just stop doing that, Cine? Cine, hey, Cine, she was just playing with this thing, and she was like, it was like going everywhere. Cine, come here. Cine, treats? Oh my gosh, Cine's back. I'll give her a treat because, you know, dog talk. 1 second. Sinona, you don't deserve a treat right now. You have been such an ass throughout this entire episode. And I am over here rewarding you for being an ass. But that's fine. Okay, sit. Wait. Okay, eat. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the jump was very strong. She did fly. She did fly very fast to get here. She flew so fast. Don't lick my face. You know I don't like face lickies. But yes, so today's evening broadcast is going to be about what no one seems to be talking about. And it's something highly likely, and it would be something very impactful. So we're going to be talking about what would happen if Russian Empire actually collapsed. Because right now, it's still the Russian Empire. It's just been renamed first to the Soviet Union and then to the Russian Federation. Around 9 or 10, yes. Well, around 9:30 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard. I just hope none of the potential civil wars go nuclear, but they've brought this on themselves, so I have trouble sympathizing. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I guess anybody has any questions, concerns, suggestions? If not, then don't forget to like this stream. Don't forget to subscribe if you are watching and you enjoyed it, but you are not subscribed, because I'm here every day and I'm here with the news on TikTok. I do videos. I also very often repost them on Twitter. I also, Cindy, stop eating the pillow. Gosh. I also have a dog that is very crazy today, but very sweet normally. And she is, you know, the mascot of this channel. If you don't like me, maybe you like Cindy. Sign up for Cindy. Don't you like the doggy? But but genuinely, thank you, Truthful. Hi. Oh, good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. But every one of your follows matters a lot, because it brings more engagement to my channel, which then pushes the videos to more people, which means that more people can find out news about Ukraine daily. On Twitter, I provide different reposts and my opinions on different things that are happening in Ukraine behind the scenes while I'm not live, and I post very frequently. And yeah, that's basically what's happening at the moment. If you would like to support my efforts and support my work, please join my Patreon. It is Spy News Network International, and you will also be the first to know about different interviews, where the channel is going. You'll be able to vote on different topics of videos and stuff like that, and basically have a little more control over the information that I provide you. Yeah, and some bonus stuff that you're not going to be able to see anywhere else. So there we go. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for caring about Ukraine. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for being okay with my dog eating me while I deliver the news today, because, you know, I am basically playing the role of a single parent to a toddler here that has 4 legs, not 2, and snorts like a pig, acts like a 2-year-old, and requires care like a little kindergarten. The Azov interview was supposed to be today, but he's at a rehabilitation facility and there is really, really crappy internet. We did try. It was impossible to hear or see anything, so we're going to do it next week when he is back to Kyiv. In the meanwhile, I'm supposed to interview Ola from Donetsk tomorrow, and I am going to try and post that over the weekend. So thank you, Karine. I really appreciate it. See you guys later at around 9:30 or 10 p.m. tonight. Bye.